Okay, so the concept of ultra early seeding, it really was born, I guess, around 2012 when I was in late March going down to a meeting at Montana State University. And guys were already on the border and into Montana, already starting to scratch around and prep and stuff like that. And it got me thinking, why? I grew up around here, and it's not something we saw a lot of, but we're starting to see more of. And rather than just prep and get ready, why can't we seed? And then, chase that concept with well, now we need a prescriptive practice around it, instead of just saying, well, I'm going to seed on this date and that date, which is, let's be honest, in communities, we plant by calendar date, or it's tied to some socio-cultural norm around there. Could be just as simple as I just watched when so-and-so down the road goes. That's my trigger. So we want to be a little more scientific than that, and we want to actually build some science around whether or not it works. And that was kind of the inspiration for it. The other thing with when I grew up, a lot of farmers would talk about seeding date in relation to crop insurance cutoff deadlines. So there were a lot of them that were convinced that crop insurance is telling me I got to be in by May 10th. So if I'm in by May 10th, obviously they're telling me my yields are going to be just the same no matter when I planted from May 10th earlier. And that's another piece to it, right? And so there's a lot of, it really does kind of require a paradigm shift, because there's also that other thing where guys are convinced they need to wait for rain, and later's better, blah, blah, blah. And so what we started to do was, the whole idea of ultra early seeding is you wait until your soils start to warm up. Okay, so now we're talking, you're gonna monitor it January, February, and as soon as that temperature rose in the top 2 inches to 0, that's when we started to plant. Not thinking 0 was gonna be good, and not even knowing if we could get in. Because we're using the same kind of drills and openers that are commercially available, Conservapack for me, or Pillar Laser, for example. And what we started to observe using an older variety was Stettler, because that was the other thing. Okay, is there going to be a genetics thing, which I was convinced there would need to be. And it turned out that 0 worked almost every single time, except if it was still tight and a bit frozen underneath, you'd rip up aggregates. And seeding, as you know, rule number 1 is you want good seed to soil contact. So if you don't get that, it's going to be a train wreck. But just about anything over 0, what we were finding was giving us optimal results up to, say, 6 degrees. So the window's a bit wide, but really what we were seeing is like that 1 to 3 degree. And you got to remember, even Alberta Ag and other people are saying, optimal time to seed is when the soil is 10 degrees to 20 degrees. So when we started showing this, right, and now we've got about 50 site years of data behind us, it really was a bit of a paradigm shift, because people are tweeting about this chart that's showing 10 degrees or 20 degrees, and we're telling them you're going to lose yield if you do that. And we did, if you combine ultra early seeding, it's not done in isolation, right? You're stacking practices with it. So me, I like the higher seeding rates. You do stuff like that, and even though, you're paying Greg more because you're seeding at a higher rate, but really, you could leave about $200 a hectare on the table by cheating your seeding rates and planting late. And again, this is over a 10-year period. Now, in terms of experiences, what we try to frame it around is, we're not gonna sell you on an idea by promising you higher yields. I'm not a salesman. I don't get commission, nothing. But what we have shown and what we go out on a limb and say is, at a minimum, over the long term, you're going to protect your yields at a minimum. You get a year like last year where you got higher yield potential. What seems to happen in higher yield potential situations is you get significantly higher yield going ultra early, and you get penalized that much more by waiting. And the other argument is like, okay, 1 to 3 degrees, I can't get in. It's too hard to get in. And the reality is, what we're learning from farmers through Alberta and Saskatchewan is that more often than not, you can get in. So you want to make sure that, if your reflex is to say I can't get in, you better go ground truth that and find out, because chances are you can get in, because we've got neighbors, or we've got farmers in just about every neighborhood in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and the ones that try it always seem to report back like, my soil's at 1 or 2 degrees, we never go this early, nobody in this community has turned a wheel, should I go? And we go, yeah, you should go, and they report back, best wheat crop I've ever had. And this is over a 10-year period. Now, are there going to be years? Yeah, there might be years. What we've seen from our experience is that when the gap closes, or when later might be a bit better, it's usually in really low yield years. I forget what that was, like 18 or 19. We had where 10 degrees bumped up just a bit over 0 and 2. But like I say, are you farming for the 1 or 2 out of 10 years? Or are you farming for the 7 or 8? Because the 7 or 8 is showing us that this works. And then what are the derivatives, right? Like, you guys that are growing durum, that was the project we wrapped up last year, because we showed it worked in hard red spring, and so then we moved on to durum, and now we're working on barley. And so for the durum last year, first time, been doing this for 34 years in the industry. Last year was the first time we ever harvested durum on August 1st, ever. And anytime I saw August 1st durum, it looked like rice, right? But this stuff was like beautiful, and I forget the yield, but it was something like 67 or 77 bushels an acre as well. So, I mean, the win-win, right? You're out of the field early, and then you're sort of piggybacking on those derivatives that you get from a winter wheat system, better competitive ability, accessing earlier moisture, out of the field earlier, so then Greg can sell you some fall cereal stuff, whatever, right, Greg? So that's kind of been sort of the backstory for this. And then the next question, of course, right away, kind of in this neighborhood, I don't know where Jason Saunders farms, but that was a question he had one of our field days we were showing that it was looking pretty good in the field. And he's like, well, why don't I just do it in the fall? And you know me, I've done a lot of work in winter wheat. I'm like, God damn it, why don't you just go plant some winter wheat, Jason? No. I want, I'm committed spring wheat guy. And so that's also what we're working on, is dormant. So in that situation, the prescriptive practice would be you wait in the fall until the soil's cool to below 2 degrees, and then you can go and try. And that is very, very risky. I would not recommend it for durum, because our experience there was that it was kind of a binary outcome. It would either work and give you decent yields, or it was a total train wreck. Now that's durum, right? And durum we know isn't as tough as our hexaploid wheats, and a little bit it's comparable, I would say, to barley. But with our hexaploid hard red spring wheats, we started a trial last fall. I think I was tweeting it actually, and you were showing some stuff with your experience as well.
Well, we had a winter wheat demo plot, and so we waited till November 18th to plant durum, Hockley, so it was Schrader and some Hockley and some barley. And wheat looked okay for the most part through the plot, but the durum was very patchy, and the barley was worse.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, I've got, what the hell do I have in the field right now? I've got West King and Oakman. The Oakman's that new solid that's going to be coming out, and West King will probably displace Brandon. Those two look really good. So I'm not here to sell you on dormant seeding. That's year one. But I'll sell you on ultra early, because we've, like you say, 50 site years of data on it, over a decade of time as well. So that's the backstory, I believe. Yes, sir.
Scott?
What about the weed control? Have there been reports on
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because what do we know with winter wheat? Like, it's way more competitive typically, right? And so with ultra early, obviously the earliest we've gone out in Lethbridge at the 0 is like February 9th. So there's not a whole lot of weeds there to take out with a pre-seed burn down. And so, but that said, we haven't really needed it. The in crop just takes care of it anyway.
But yeah, that's what I mean. It's the in crop. Like, it hasn't been changed the in crop spraying.
No, your in crop would be the same, because it does sit there a while, right? And that's the concern that growers have. It's like, okay, you plant it there, and then it's sitting there, it's getting snowed on, 30 days of below 0 weather. There's no way it's going to survive. And we've got pictures of Durham seedlings actually pushing through snow, and those were the best treatments. So that abiotic stress earlier on, it is not a big deal. And then just to wrap up, the biological basis for all of this, why it works and why later typically doesn't, is there's sort of a new theory around stages of wheat and development, and the theory is the critical growth period, which is kind of like stem jointing, and then just like 10 days post flower. That period, you can really beat up a wheat crop before then. And you probably, like, if you had an early hail, graze it, whatever, you're not going to affect your yield at all. But once you get into that critical growth period, if anything happens then, you're in big trouble. And particularly if it has to weather through temperatures of 31 degrees or higher, which is what we get in July, more so than June, that will cause floret abortion. And seed number is probably one of your number one yield components. So if that starts to drop, your yield suffers. And so what we do with ultra early seeding, though, is we've shifted the entire critical growth period out of July. So it's wrapping up flowering at the end of June, whereas your later stuff is exposed to whether or not we get hit with that or not in July. And more often than not, we do. And it came a little bit earlier this year. But that's why this works, and that's the biological basis for it. And that's why later is so much riskier, because you're going to have that thing flowering in July, and it's going to get hammered almost always. Yeah.
How's your ergot pressure? Like fall rye, you have a bit of an ergot with flowering earlier?
Well, rye, that's more of a rye problem, just because of how rye the pollen has to move. It doesn't self-pollinate, so.
Yeah, but how does this one do it? The spring wheat, it's.
No, there's no issues with that. Nor, and we really haven't seen it with disease either. The benefits just keep. The benefits are definitely outweighing any.
You're seed treating, right?
Yeah, and I.
Fungicide and.
Yeah, in fact, and I'm a bit of a hypocrite here, because I really push seed treatments for winter wheat, because we've seen amazing results with it and published it and blah blah blah. Now I just published a paper with our ultra early on one of our experiments where we had a seed treatment and we didn't see a difference. So you can, was it the 5-year period where we didn't get enough? Like, and I don't try to sell anybody on really the biotic benefit of a seed treatment. I try to sell it because we know that those seed treatments change a plant, its metabolic pathways, blah, 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 such that it becomes more resistant to abiotic stress. So I thought for sure with ultra early seeding, you'd need it. Like you do with winter wheat, but you actually don't. And when you get a year like last year, the old story, because I've got another experiment where we got winter wheat, spring wheat, ultra early and late. And last year, that typical 20% advantage of, say, a wildfire variety in winter wheat versus Brandon spring wheat, that yield gap closed with ultra early, whereas it was significantly lower, and that typical 20 to 25% lower with the later seeded Brandon. So yeah, Corny?
I was going to ask about the seed treatment protocols, because when we did it, we had the seed treatment wear off, and particularly on the insect side of it. So, is there any?
What do you mean wear off?
They talk that it's a 30-day period on CBQ, and my early seeded irrigation got hammered by wire worms.
So then what would happen with winter wheat?
It'd be established and they could take it. We seeded April 9th on one field and April 17th on a neighboring field. Both had wireworms. The later seeded stuff, the wireworms were feeding, but they were still being infected by the seed treatment. And the seed treatment wore off on the early stuff.
Yeah, I've never heard that.
Well, and
Possibly.
just so everyone heard, the question was like, if you have seed treatment in the soil, does that time period, does it wear off before, and it loses protection from that insecticide? Or, but I would think seed treatment would, it breaks down with temperature and time in a relationship with temperature, right? So you'd think it would last longer if the soil's colder, or maybe it's not that way. I'm not a seed treatment expert, but.
So the other question I had is the advantage on irrigation is flowering timing. Is it more an advantage on dryland situations or irrigation?
Well, you would think that because you're kind of taking care of your water limited issue with irrigation that you wouldn't suffer that. But the reality is we have breeders here that want to test their dryland targeted genetics under irrigation here in Lethbridge because of the wind desiccation that you get. And so the later stuff it's still exposed to 30 plus degrees. Plus we get that wind desiccation here. So your ability to protect against that floret abortion at those temperatures probably isn't any better on irrigation. You get better establishment and you're taking care of, making sure that during that critical growth period, the other issue you have is that source sink thing. So that source, whether it's nutrients or water, has to be there as well. So that you've taken care of. But that issue of that heat stress is still a real thing on irrigation too. People just don't seem to, see it as much because it looks good.
Well, and in this irrigation district, I would, if you have a moisture rationed year and Alison wants to move that water to a potato, well, can she ultra early? And
Right.
that's the thought I think in this area would be, can you move that water and get the same yields, right? So
when was this field seeded?
well, we can.
Yeah, Alison will walk you through there.
I'll get her to introduce all like her field and all that in a second once we flip it over to her.
You seen any correlations on seeding gauge and crop height?
I think we see it a little bit shorter, earlier. So it seems to set yourself up a little bit better for harvest management as well. We're also going at a higher seeding rate maybe than what somebody else would be doing too. So we're getting that shortening from that as an artifact, maybe even more than the seeding part.
Any idea why, even on irrigation, stuff's shorter this year? Like it's, some years crops are taller, some years crops are shorter, even without moisture stress.
Yeah, not really. You've got those genes that are interacting. I mean, they're all semidwarfs, right? So those genes, for whatever reason, with the conditions that we have really, really overexpressed. And you walk your field, and mine's no different. Like I know some guys are saying the later is better this year. It might be. I know in my own fields where we're comparing winter wheat to ultra early to late, the ultra early looks like it still might beat the later stuff, but it's going to be fractional. It'll be a year maybe where it just protects it, if anything. But it's short, man. And I know, and I get why farmers get, at least the dryland guys are like, what are these breeders doing? Like, we need some varieties that are tall to scavenge for water, that can be managed at harvest, blah, 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 right? Because, we were talking about kochia earlier. Like a wheat plant that tall is going to get its ass kicked from kochia.
Well, second flush kochia this year.
Right. And we're getting our ass kicked at the research station on that one site just as bad.
We're all getting it.
Well, I'm on the breeding question on height. We might have 5 customers out of 400 that would ask for something taller.
I was going to say, there's varieties out there that are taller.
They don't sell.
They don't sell.
I don't know about that. I don't think
Yeah, there is varieties.
I think farmers like you, with all due respect, are a louder voice than some of the other guys that aren't speaking up with that. Because I get a lot of feedback from guys like Saskatchewan's in its 8th, 9th year of drought. And, you know, I think there's some that would like a competitive tall variety. There's lots of short ones.
Except they won't pay for seed.
Well,
Yeah.
So,
I
that's a different issue.
yes. I had to look up the notes, and I believe it was 40 plants per square foot was the target here. 2.7 bushels per acre was what the booking confirmation said, Blair. And then why Hockley? It's because we had that ready. That's the challenge with this. Is if a lot of people start doing this, it's like, well, what varieties do we actually have cleaned, tested, and ready to ship to that customer at that point? So my thought is, if you're thinking of doing this, Blair and I need to know in like October, and you need to know in October, because in my opinion, looking at how we did our dormant planting, we treated it like a winter wheat field. So we did a residual broadleaf spray and glyphosate like we did for our winter wheat plots, and then we planted our dormant seeding into like a winter wheat prepped field, right? So I would think if I was going to pick a field to go and do something like this on, I would want to do a fall residual broadleaf with a glyphosate in the fall and prep that field as if you're going to be prepping it in April. So do that in October, you know, to get that residual broadleaf on there and a burn down of all your thistles and whatever you might have out there. So that'd be my thought. On our dormant seeding, that was really hard to hit the timeline. Like, it took forever for the soil to get cold enough consistently, and then 2 days later we were going to get big snow. So we had like a 1 day window to plant dormant planted, and then we had a big snow. Now the soil didn't freeze up though, so then the soil didn't freeze till a month later, till December. That's till Christmas basically. That snow insulated from the cold temps in November, so that was something weird. But it took forever to get below 2 degrees to plant those dormant things. And then the guys were like, "Well, let's go because it's going to snow a foot or whatever, or 6 inches." So on the seed side of things, you know, if you want treated seed, don't listen to Brian. You gotta get, you know, we can't treat in the winter. We can't treat every week, right? If it's minus 15, it's difficult to treat, or you don't want to treat. You might get flaking. So maybe once a month, you got to get seed on your truck when the window is in, you know, December or whatever. And what else? Oh, and 2020 Seed Lab, Sarah from 2020, we sent her a ton of samples, so she's working. And Brian, you might be interested in this. Sarah from 2020, she might have talked to you, but
Yeah.
we sent her a bunch of samples because she's trying to figure out
Yeah, we sent our samples too.
Okay. What seed lots are better? So the same variety, 2 different seed lots might not perform the same in these conditions. So what seed lot is better or worse? Because it might not be varietal as much as just seed lot, or you know, like, because seed lot to seed lot, they're so different year to year, lot to lot. So that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at these types of things. And yeah, and some varieties, I think, you know, I know like Carberry had some winter wheat parentage in that variety, or a U.S. winter variety. So I think there are certain varieties that breeders use up here that might have a little bit of winter heritage in them from American winter varieties. Maybe that impacts how they survive the winter a little bit.
Yeah, like that's a good point on that genetics. Like, we're relieved to see we don't need special genetics.
Because I was convinced that we would, but we have, like, we use Stettler to start with. Like, it's an older variety, and now we've gone to newer ones, and that's why I think, you know, it's a system that might benefit from understanding more on the genetics side, just to further enhance the resilience of the system. You know, so to your point, I think that's I forgot to mention that, so thanks for doing that.
Yeah, you bet. So, so this is Alison Davie with North Paddock Farms. I'll turn it over to her. Whenever you want, we can go walk and look and whatever. But before, yeah, so you can introduce the site, and then we can kind of walk and talk in the field and see what you did. So, yeah, Alison. Oh, you got one.
Yeah, I'm Alison Davie. I farm side. My husband Michael, he's in the back there, and then beside him is Ben Dick, who planted this field for us. So what got me interested in ultra early seeding was I really like winter wheat. I saw how in the spring it was capturing some of that winter moisture and those late snows, early rains, and I thought, we can't use winter wheat on all of our fields. We grow a lot of export Timothy hay as well, and we learned the hard way that you can't mix those two together. So we thought, how can we, try something like this? And I heard Brian talk a few times, and I thought that sounds kind of interesting. So we've been trying to do something like this for the last 3 years, and it just hasn't worked out. Whether the field's too wet or ground conditions weren't right or anything like that, or we weren't ready was part of it too. So yeah, I'm excited that it finally worked out this year. And yeah, we're in a moisture deficit situation. We're facing limited irrigation, and so something like this, yeah, I really want to see if this is something that we can do moving forward. So this was a seed canola field last year, and we direct seeded it. The first seeding date that we had was January 30th, and we weren't originally planning on seeding that early, but because the last couple of years we kind of left it till around that February mark when the ground's trying to warm up, and we missed that window. We thought we have the window now. There wasn't snow at that time, and we had 0 degrees in the top inch of soil, so we thought let's just go in there. We did 4 passes. We weren't sure if it's ultra early or if it's dormant seeded at that point. And I kind of thought, well, if it's 5 acres and nothing comes up, well, we can afford to replant it then. Yeah. And
was with a disc drill?
Yeah, a 455 John Deere disc drill we planted with. Yeah. And so then
Tillage. What did you do for tillage in the fall, or did you lay any residual herbicides down, or?
No, so the kind of the tough thing about our farm is we never know our rotation. I knew that I wanted to try that, so I think I kind of had said, 65 acres we'd like to try. We picked up seed, I want to say around Christmas time or something, when we had a good weather window, and kept it on the truck. But because, seed canola and potatoes, we do have to shuffle those around. Kind of in my mind, the safest option after is seed canola, because I don't like to follow potatoes after seed canola, and I know I'm not obviously going to need it for my seed canola rotation. So when I was looking at our fields, I knew that this was a potential candidate for it. But again, I wasn't confident that it wouldn't be seeded to something else, so we didn't do anything in the fall. We just did a light disc. We like to do that after our seed canola, just to try and get that germinated, and then winter kill as much of that volunteer canola as we can. So yeah, just direct seeded here, end of January. And then, so kind of luckily right after that we had a snow, because yeah, you're kind of pushing it because the ground is obviously quite frozen below. So we seeded it 1 inch deep. We tried to go deeper, but that wasn't going to work. So we had a snow over top, and that kind of closed it up, so we were lucky on that. And then the end of February 28th, we got another weather window. It wasn't quite as nice because we had that snow in February, and it was very cold, as most of you remember. But again, I wanted to try it because that was, again, on the upside. That's kind of what Brian had been saying, like you want to look at it when the weather's on the up, and so we thought, okay, let's try it. We didn't get as good a seed to soil contact as I would have liked, but again, we lucked out, and within a few days we had another snowstorm, and it kind of just closed it in, so it sat in good moisture. And then the original plan was to wait until April or something like that, and seed at our more traditional time, beginning of April. But I kind of just got antsy, and we had good moisture, and we had just been told kind of the irrigation district was looking at, restricting allocation this year. And I thought, you know what, I just want to plant the rest of this field to try and take advantage of the moisture that we had just gotten from the snow. So the rest of the field was seeded March 13th. So that was around 2 degrees at the end of February and on March 13th. And then after that, the soil continued to warm up. And after March 13th, then the frost was coming out of the soil then. So
Where's that line at?
in the field,
Yeah.
so it's going to be the flags over there. So I believe it's red flag. The flags further south, that is the January 30th seeded. And then the flags just a little bit to the north, that is the February 28th seeded. So I wanted to put it in the middle of the field just to try and get it. And then we went on an angle to the canola rows. We did notice, with fertility after seed canola, I saw a little bit of difference between the two, but we kind of did our best. And then we did end up spraying 2 passes. Again, because of the volunteer canola, I like to get on top of that as quick as we can. So we sprayed an early pass on that. And then, my seed guys, just the outside, sorry. And then we went in with our regular spray a few weeks later after that. Yeah.
Fertility's all the same for all
Yeah, fertility's all the same. So typically, we would go in and we would spread fertilizer, broadcast fertilizer, and then we would cultivate and then we would plant. With it being so early and then not having access to irrigation that early, we did put on 70 pounds with RMU, so with some sort of nitrification inhibitor, to try and capture that with some rain, just because I wasn't confident that the rain was coming. As everybody knows, in southern Alberta you never know. And then at tillering stage we went in with another 70 pounds, and we had enough background P and K that I was happy with it. Sometimes we'll go through, or when we plant we'll put down phos then, but we just weren't ready and set up at that point. I kind of had thought about the seed and hadn't thought about the fertilizer, and it was just a little bit too all at once. So yeah, so this seed was treated with Raxil Pro. That's our typical,
fungicide.
just the fungicide. Yeah, if it's coming out of Timothy rotation, then we might look at something like a Taraxa or something with an insecticide, but typically we just put the Raxil Pro on there. And then in terms of emergence, I would say the January 30th stuff was the first stuff out of the ground. It was maybe 3 or 4 days before the rest of it, but we had fairly even emergence. The 2 earlier dates we were aiming for 40 plants, and then the rest of the field we aimed for 35, and then I would say on average across the whole field we ended up around 30 plants. So a little bit less. I didn't know how much we would be losing with those ultra early seeded, so I just thought I would go a little bit higher on those. So in terms of PGR and fungicide, we put a PGR on this end of May 26th, and then we sprayed a fungicide on June 16th on this field. So that is, we have other fields that we planted middle of April, and we're a good 10 days ahead of those fields. Same with when it came into flowering and things like that. Like here you're at late milk stage, and we've got our more traditional fields right now are just ending flowering. So we did capture some of that cooler weather and avoided the July heat there. So
Did you notice a difference in flowering between your timings, or was it too close to notice?
surprisingly, like the January stuff came up first, but the February seeded stuff was maybe 3 days ahead the rest of the year or the rest of the season. You can hardly pick anything out now, but when it came to flowering, yeah, those heads emerged first in the February seeded stuff.
What's the variety again?
Hockley. Yeah. Colette's the person over here that reps that variety.
How about water? How much water do you put on? Pivot.
So yeah, like Greg said, I do have to take a little bit of water off this field for some of our other crops, and so we've put about 7 inches of water on this field so far. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it would have taken a few more passes, but I would say that, like, right now we're just ending the bulk of the watering on our more traditional fields, and this one was beginning of June that it was doing the bulk of the watering, which again, yeah, it was kind of nice because, you know, this time of year you look at your irrigation board and you've got, you know, 75% of your pivots running, and it was kind of nice to spread some of that load into earlier June where maybe you're not running quite as many. So any other questions on that?
See the disease difference between the alternatives and the wheat fields?
The question is leaf disease or disease differences, ultra early versus others.
No, I wouldn't say so. I'd say it's fairly even overall. Like, it's just kind of a low disease pressure year. I'm not sure. We've got one field that I seeded at a higher seeding rate, and I'm seeing a little bit of powdery mildew down in the lower leaves there that I wasn't seeing in this one, but that could also just be a little bit of field conditions, and it was coming out of you know, grass and things like that, so there's just different things going on. So no, this year I haven't really seen any difference in that.
And then you guys will GPS combine yield data?
Yeah, we'll get the yield mapping and see if we see any difference. So yeah, I mean, for me, what I'm looking for to see if this is a success or not, as long as it's comparable to our other fields, I would call it a success, because my ultimate goal was to try and capture some of that earlier moisture, and I feel like that's just something that our farm's going to have to look at moving forward. And so yeah, as long as the yield is comparable, then it was something that I would try as much as, you know, as logistically possible to continue with doing something like this. So.
So you want a way wagon with a load cell for when you're doing this? I could bring one down to you. We'll talk later.
Maybe we can talk later.
So she's trying to be a dryland farmer with a little bit of an assist here. So
I want to be an irrigation farmer, but
a little more snow in the mountains for that.
yeah. And I guess just as you guys are driving around, if you're curious for comparison sakes, the field, like the north half of the neighboring quarter, the north half of that was seeded March 31st. That had our more traditional cultivated fertilizer down and then seeded into that. And then we have ultra early and ultra late this year. We have a spring wheat field that was seeded June the 4th on the south half of the field, just if you guys are curious as you're driving around. So.
Because that was a rye field that you took off at Boots?
Yeah, and we did that to try and control kochia.
Okay.
So how much rain did the Lord give you here?
Not enough. Well, we had an inch and a half. What was it 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago? But the one really good thing was we did have that moisture in April, and we captured all of that in this field. So right at a critical stage, we were able to capture that April moisture. So I can't recall off the top of my head how much we got, but I know that I was racing to try and get other fields planted, and this one was just happily taking in that moisture. So.
When do you get water turned on here this year? Was it early May?
Yeah, first week of May, I believe it was.
That's always the thing on dry land. It's never enough.
Yeah.
It's never it.
Well, they don't call it wet land, they call it dry land.
Is yours? Yep.
So here just south of me, we've got the January 30th seeded. And then north of me, we've got the February 28th seeded. So between I should have chose different colored flags. So between the pink flags is the February, and between the red flags is the January. So, and then you would have walked past the March 13th seeded. So yeah, at the moment you really can't see much difference between them.
So between here and that flag is January 30th?
Yeah.
And on the other side of that flag?
March 13th.
March 13th.
And north of the other one is also March 13th.
Okay. And then where Brian's standing is
February 28th.
February 28th.
Yeah.
Okay. So January, March, February.
Yeah.
Okay. Greg's confused.
Yes.
Good randomization.
Yeah, you should have went in order.
Well, it's March north of that again.
Okay.
It's almost in order.
So when I scheduled the tour date for this, I was texting Brian. And I was like, "When do you think we're going to see flowering in here?" But I think it was such an early year. So I was trying to see some flower timing differences for this date. But you would have been flowering like a month ago or 4 weeks ago. Or
3 anyway.
3.
Yeah, like a good few weeks ago. We sprayed June 16th, so right around.
So June 16th was flower timing. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
yeah, that makes sense.
Our stuff that was planted middle of April, a good 10 days later.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And then, the field over there that was planted at the end of March, I would say is about 4 days or something behind this field, so not a huge gap.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think on a year where if we couldn't get seeding till mid-April, like some years that happens, right? Then you'd really see the differences, I think, on more so than, or would you disagree, Brian? Like if on those years where we can't seed till April 15th, would you see bigger difference in the ultra early versus the seeding time, or it's just the soil is cold so it's not doing anything?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. Like I think, flowering is going to be dependent on the heat stress, right? So think of that critical growth period like a rubber band. What we want, and to the point, the question about the height thing last year, I mean, don't forget last year, it was like we were living in the UK in June, and we were cool, we were wet, and then all of a sudden we got beat on by heat and drought stress. So if you get that critical growth period completed, the real goal would be to be able to stretch it out. And that's why those South Americans and in the UK, they can get 9-10 tons a hectare. They get that, they're able to stretch the critical growth period out without getting beat up by the heat and drought stress. We're never going to experience that no matter what people say, because our climate's different. To the flowering question, so it's a yearly thing potentially, because it'll compress based on what we're experiencing for weather. Ideally, it'd be nice to stretch it out a little bit longer, because that's telling us that the whole critical growth period is probably stretching out, and that means way higher yields. And I think we got a bit of that last year, which is like, I mean, who's gonna harvest on August 1st Durham and get those kind of yields on dryland, right? So something definitely happened that was beneficial during that critical growth period, not just ultra early, but then the weather was synced perfectly with it, and that's what we're trying to do with this practice, right?
Well, I think if you're farming so I mean, if you're farming a lot of acres, or you're just a dryland farm, then, well, something's going to be first and something's going to be last. So how do you get more acres done under the key times? That's where I think this fits a little bit too. If you're farming a lot of acres, or you're mainly dryland, or because like our farm, we're maybe 20% dryland. Well, you can do that early and move on to the irrigation, right? So then we never really seed late on our dryland. Well, our customers aren't quite like that, right? A lot of them are just dryland, right? So, yeah. So you're always gonna have some late stuff on a big farm. Right. More comments, questions?
When we kind of started thinking about this 5 years ago, I was one of the ones that was more hesitant about getting stuff in early, because I thought, like, we don't get irrigation till, you know, beginning of May. Is it going to run out of moisture in there? So I took a little bit more convincing originally, but we found, not just with this field, but with any other fields, like, planting it as early as we can has never had a downside. Doesn't always have an upside, and I think I talked to somebody else about that. Doesn't always have an upside, but we have not found it to have a downside. So.
Well, and thoughts around fusarium timing. If you can get flowering mid-June versus early July, you should be able to eliminate. Did your research show any fusarium differences, or not really?
We didn't have any fusarium pressure, but it's good you brought that up. We had a site at Swift Current, I think it was last year or the year before, that got absolutely hammered by sawfly.
Oh.
And there was this one old retired breeder that doesn't really get along with agronomists anyway, and he's out there saying that the ultra early stuff would get beat up worse. And thankfully, Kui Lu, my colleague and collaborator out there, took pictures, and if you had planted at 10 degrees, it was flat. And the ultra early stuff is kind of acting like winter wheat, where it can escape it, because sawflies they like soft, tender, high moisture stems. So the stuff that's a little bit earlier, if there's a choice, they'll avoid it. They'll go for the more tender stems. And so that's what happened. Like it's a great picture. It's just like as the seeding dates got later and later, that it just got progressively more hammered. And so, yeah, to your point about FHB, we think it would act kind of similarly with winter wheat as a bit of an escape mechanism, because you are establishing some asynchrony with some of this disease and insect pressure.
So I often get that question about sawfly, and they're like, well, is winter wheat immune to sawfly, or what's the, right? No. So maybe it's that timing that when the sawfly are out, the winter wheat's too woody already, and they want to go to a softer crop, right?
Yeah.
So
they'll level it if there's nothing else. I mean, they'll try to lay an egg in a wooden stick in an experiment, but if they get a choice, they're going after what they prefer.
Yeah, because I find, like, even this year we have a little bit of we've had soft wheat on dryland and soft wheat's hollow stem, and I'm like, is it just that we're there, it's our first crop, so we're there with the combine right on time? And I have seen cutting in the soft wheat, but maybe they're just going to those nicer crops that weren't planted as early as that first soft wheat field, because we're only doing 500 acres of.
Yeah, they'd love your farm, all the choice.
So many options, yeah.
So many dining options.
Yeah, but yeah, winter wheat you just don't really see cutting on dryland, you know.
So what are you expecting for yield? What's our goal here?
Given moisture, like 90 plus would be
Yeah, I think you're
That's
there.
better than 100 bushels.
Yeah.
You're more optimistic than they are.
Yeah, well, it's better to be, get it ahead than, I didn't do that.
What's on for nutrients?
Pardon?
What's on for nutrients? NP?
We put on 70 pounds early, and then another 70 pounds during the the tillering stage, but we always aim for about 220, so it just depends on what the background is in the soil.
But you're aiming for a 100 bushel crop, right? That's what your fertility is, your
Yeah.
goal is? Yeah.
Well, I think it's all relative, right? Some years you might be a 110 bushel farmer, next year you're a 90 due to environment. Okay, is the earlier better than your average seeding date? I think that's the goal. Are you better than what it could have been that year? Because one year to the next, you could be a great yielder and.
So how true is that you tested for protein, like it's only 12%, is that true then you didn't put enough N on for yield?
If the protein was too low, you're
but
sorting the
below
end, is what you're
12,
saying?
You didn't put enough nitrogen on, no?
I would think so if it ends up being low, yeah.
But that's still a nitrogen thing.
Yeah, it's later.
It's
applied.
it's an inverse relationship with yield and protein,
Yes.
right?
But you need, to get high protein, you need sufficient N.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
I
if
don't know
it's a
about
drought year-
200, but
Well, you're not talking 220 pounds of N.
Yeah, between
product,
background
maybe.
and applied.
Okay.
Of available and
typically 120 actual meets N sufficiency across the board.
I would say people that are pushing fertility would be where she's at. If they're or pushing yields, doing PGR.
Yeah, 140 N is kind of, that's the upper limit before you start worrying about lodging.
But then you need a good root radiator.
Yeah, PGR. Yeah.
So what did you put on for PGR?
Manipulated.
Do you swath or straight cut?
Straight cut. Yeah. And like with the nutrients, we could see that it was a lot greener in the beginning where the male canola bays were, and it was a little bit more yellow where the females were, so I could tell we were a little bit nutrient deficient, because originally I think I was going to go with 50 pounds on my second application, and I upped it to 70.
Okay, which field over here is just spring seeded? Traditional seeding.
So the north half of that field, that was seeded March 31st.
You can see the darker, the tanner color, right?
Yeah, so I would say that's only a few days behind this. Logistically, we've actually treated them pretty similar for spray timings, just for ease around the farm.
Oh, so that's early seeding too.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, in the last couple of years, that would be our more traditional, would be beginning of April. We have some seeded that, like middle of around the 15th, 20th of April would be our next seeding dates. And yeah, PGR and fungicide, they were a good week to 10 days behind these two fields. So definitely see a difference between middle of April and basically anything April 1st and earlier.
Now, Greg, what's the advantage on dry land? I guess early moisture, right?
Yeah,
I understand
early
her point.
moisture. Yeah. Well, I think
As
it's
a
the same
potato
as.
farmer to seed canola. She wants early moisture so she can transfer water, right?
You're the same. Or dryland guy's the same, right? Like on dryland, if you get on average, like you've got data around timings, right? Like maybe we should, like Dale and us were talking about that. It's like, okay, you're gonna get a year like this where the later stuff might do just fine, but you're gonna get a year like the previous year where you were a
that's
genius
early
to be the
rain.
early guy, right? So maybe talk about your research about where it sits, I guess.
Well, I mean, honestly, the concept was targeting dryland because the majority of acres on the prairies is dryland, right? And so we don't just do research for Southern Alberta. So, and where we've had early adopters, it's all been dryland. Except, now we've got Alison and some others doing it on irrigation, but the target was dryland. And it goes back to my point about, you're trying to reap some of the benefits of winter wheat. So yeah, early season moisture. But the big thing is you go back to that critical growth period over and over again. Dryland, irrigation, it doesn't matter. Like maybe on irrigation you can, with the rubber band effect, maybe stretch that critical growth period out, and that's why you got just a killer looking field. But you've shifted that critical growth period out on dryland too. So, is there going to be a year where late's better? Of course there's going to be. Is it going to be, what's the frequency though? Is it out of 10 years? Is it 5, 6? There's no way. No way you can convince me of that doing this 12 years now. It's more like 1 to 2. And so if it's 1 to 2 out of 5, so that's 2 out of 10, that means 6 to 8 or more of those years, you're losing money if you're doing it. Because there's no way, if you've got to plant a wheat crop in July that's flowering, there's no way you're going to optimize yield if we've got the heat that we're almost
Your
always
early
get.
seeding is better.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10.
9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know those again the years where late beats early usually is a low yielding environment too.
And late
So-
is relative. Like, and some guys are April 9th starting. That's normal for them. Other guys are April 22nd
Well,
starting.
how many guys actually track the soil temperature? Well, you're not a farmer.
No, but it's all over the board. It's so erratic.
But in your opinion, like how many? What do you think the percentage is?
Every spring, like it. To me, there's early and then there's too early, but every year is different on what the too early is.
Not if you're doing it by soil temperature.
But we get those cold snaps and we get
Doesn't
those.
matter with ultra early though. If you once the soils have started to warm, that's the prescriptive thing. And once they start to warm and you get to 2, if you wait till after 6, 7, you're losing yield.
Yeah.
So
I
when
think
does that happen?
Yeah.
I can't tell you that because I've gone from February 9th for the 0, and some years we haven't put that one in until March.
Yeah.
Like
we
late March.
Yeah.
So that's why the calendar date thing just does not fly.
Yeah. I agree. Calendar isn't a good indicator because the weather can change. We get a cold snap. Like we soil test all winter, and yeah, some years it's freezing up in December, and other years it's
Right.
not freezing up till January, and then it's a block of ice till March, and other years, we're punching through. But I think the value in this is big farms. Like everybody's got to do more acres per drill, especially if the commodity cycle is coming down a bit. And on
Price
big
of
farms.
equipment? Maybe price of equipment?
And you need 10,000 acres of drill. Like we can push past 10,000 acres of drill on big farms. You got to spread out the acres.
We planted durum on irrigation March the 28th. It was 5 degrees, the soil temperature. We had a nice little week there. But the coldest it got was -2 at the seed, and it was literally frozen that morning, the seed. And that's our beautifulest durum crop right now. on irrigation.
I mean, if you've seen some of the pictures we have of what our seedlings are being exposed to, you would think this is the dumbest idea anybody would come up with. And the resiliency of wheat might vary a little bit by species. The tetraploid durums maybe a little, but they're just as resilient and adaptable to this system as the hexaploid hard reds, for sure. Hey, are you recording this?
Yeah.
And it's been
Why didn't you
around-
tell me that? I wouldn't have sworn as much
It's
as
been around
that.
a long time. The Bible talks about it.
What's that?
It's been around a long time. Early seeding, the Bible talks about it.
Like I said, I don't read that book. So,
But Joe, in the old days, early seeding was June 10th.
yeah.
Well, probably.
Well, the idea has been, where some pioneer that are more comfortable with a higher amount of risk would do it, but there's never been the prescriptive approach of how to do it. Like there's a book, a pioneer out in Manitoba wrote about his first seedings, and he's doing it in Manitoba, and like some of his dates were in March. And now you try and convince a modern day grower that you can do that in Manitoba, and they look at you like you've got 3 heads. Until like these guys here, Patura Seeds out of Manitoba, since Stamps wouldn't give me a t-shirt, I have to wear this one. You can record that.
It's like you guys going into deer with a case hat. It's the same kind of guy.
But it's picking up in Manitoba too as an idea. Like it's,
Well, a lot of guys will tell you, well, your seed treatment is wearing off. Well, your seed is frozen now. It's sitting in the soil there. Your seed treatment is wearing off. Your fungicide is wearing off. Your insecticide is wearing off. Well, look at your winter wheat when you plant it,
Well, and the analogy is pretty appropriate for winter wheat, because there's some spring wheat growers you just would never convince them that winter wheat could work. You'll never convince them. Like they'll try it once, they'll have a train wreck maybe, and if they do, they'll go back to spring wheat and they'll have train wreck after train wreck with the way they manage their spring wheat. That's fine, right? So some will shift, some will buy into the paradigm shift, and some just won't. That's why, we have days like this where Alison's out in the field showing this is what we did, this is how I did it, this is how it fits. You're talking about anybody else that would have looked at that seed, would have thought you were crazy and you were going to get a terrible outcome.
I was
you
told
do,
I was crazy for doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So I've heard that story a lot in my career.
Well, the colony is different too. You've got an aggressive seed guy, and you get another drill out there. Under snow type of thing, or 3 of them, or 4 of them.
We have the same problem on our farms. Like you got this style and this style, and
You
someone
got
who's
Dad
got
and Grandpa there, they're pounding
yeah,
at you.
yes, and then if the field looks like crap, it's like, well, that's that guy's responsibility, right?
You're the hero or the zero. Like it just, you know, sometimes no matter what you do and you're looking like a hero, you're still a zero, you know, in somebody's eyes, whatever.
I think the key is if you're gonna try it, do what Alison did. Like my thought is, okay, so where do we go from here? Like, if you're gonna try it, do what she did was perfect, right? Do 5 acres, something you can afford to have a problem on or to fix. It's fixable. But my thought is, okay, if you're gonna do it, plan in September and October so you can get that field prepped or a herbicide laid down. Plan seed, get it on a truck at the right time, and then do not too many acres. But it's so, like you said, it's so tempting to continue. So she had the 5, and it's perfect, right? But then, like, she got into the last part of it, it's like, let's just do the field. And so just, I mean, don't do your whole farm, but do a field, right? Like, see if something can work, and then if it starts working, you'll kind of do more, right? Is that what are your thoughts, Alison?
Yeah, no, for sure. I was just checking my notes on emergent. So yeah, the early seeded, those ones were emerging around the 3rd of April, and then the March seeded stuff was emerging around the 10th. So it did go through some cold weather, especially the early stuff, and I was worried that, you know, you're gonna freeze it off or something like that, and it turned out okay in the end. Yeah, like I would just, if you want to try it, just, yeah, we chose a 60-acre piece here because, like Greg said, we could afford to have a wreck on it, and yeah, it's on the highway too. Yeah, yeah, we knew that was a risk. Yeah. I'll just stick some more flags out and we'll call it more trials. Yeah, so I mean, like we've tried. The last 5 years we moved it up to as much as we could beginning of April, and I was kind of happy with that, and so that's why then this was kind of the next step, as long as we got the weather window and had the field conditions and stuff to try this. So I mean, on our farm you don't know till you try, and you don't know till you try on your own farms either, because what works on our farm might not work on your farm or in different locations even on your farm and stuff like that. So it's just a trial and error thing.
Would a wheat lane be a good variety to do this?
Oh, variety-wise, maybe he's got more experience on that. He has wheatland specifically.
We haven't used wheatland specifically, but what we find, I had a PhD student. We tested every market class, like the top 2 varieties within each one. I don't know if wheatland was in that or not. But anyway, they were all well adapted to the practice. So I would be surprised if we found, you know, I think there's opportunity, don't get me wrong, on the breeding side to get something like a flex wheat or something that's more amenable to it. But right now we're not seeing it, you know, a variety that responds poorly to it. That's for sure. I think they're all like, let's be real here. Like, our breeders are breeding in the northern latitudes that parallel Siberia. So by default, they're not trying to select for that winter resilience necessarily, but it's just coming through as a default anyway, right?
If you could seed this early on dry land and get out of the soft fly pressure like winter wheat.
Exactly.
Because we cannot seed spring wheat on dry land because of soft flies. Because nobody wants to swath anymore.
Oakman. We can sell you Oakman this fall.
I'd rather put Beres in there. Forget about it.
Well, and again, that's a good reason too to experiment with more than one variety. Like I don't know that I put all my eggs in one basket variety wise. Anyway, for a lot of different reasons, I think soft fly being one of them.
But now I know why soft flies are not on winter wheat.
Yeah.
It's too early.
You haven't been to any of my talks apparently. I did my PhD in managing soft fly.
Oh, got a question back here.
Right. This is soft flies.
Cheatgrass and winter crops.
You use pyroxasulfone.
Is that fierce? What's
the fierce is, I think, the tank mix of pyroxasulfone with flumioxazine, and that would work fine. And we published a paper on that where, yeah, it was tough, but you can manage it. Both Japanese and downy brome you can control with that quite effectively, and it would work great with an ultra early seeding system too. If you plan right, you can put that soil residual herbicide down like Greg was talking about and manage managed effectively to the point where, I mean, we know with winter wheat, and not that many do it, but I know with winter wheat, if you just put full 2,4-D down, not assuming you don't have a cheatgrass problem, but if you just put middle of October a full rate of 2,4-D on winter wheat, you don't need any in-crop herbicides most of the time. After that, it's kind of aesthetics.
That's assuming you're planting your winter wheat on time and it's competitive. Because if you're kind of into September, which happens a lot, you push late, then you don't have the competition from that fall crop as good for,
Fair enough. You're quick to point that out.
We see it all.
Don't swear, you're recorded.
Well, we do it ourselves, right? Like even our own farm, right? You're busy with harvest. It's like, oh, we're gonna hit that field, we're gonna seed that field, and you just get too late, right? Too fast, and it's too easy to go plant stuff late. I mean, we had a fall trick field. We were waiting for beans to come off on a land trade, and October 7th we planted this fall trick. It did amazing still, but there's more risk by doing that and less competition, more wind erosion risk, but that happens to all of us on fall crops. You just start to get too late, and then his fall 2,4-D doesn't quite work. That
no.
September 1st, yes.
Okay, me and Joe are going to be the guinea pigs. We're going to try it on dry land. Are you up for it?
Attaboy.
What do you mean you're shaking your head already?
We gotta get competition. Who's gonna get the bigger yield? Who's gonna go earlier? And who's gonna get bigger?
Joe away on a trip somewhere.
We just get Alison to run a drill 10 miles up the road and see.
Oh, Allison's gonna plant it for you. Okay. Okay. As long as you're buying seed here, yes.
Yeah. We're going to start that song that Alison sung pretty quick.
Where the snow melts and you get some ice, then like where it gets another cold snap and you get covered with ice. Like,
Well, not complete ice encasement. I mean, we see that from time to time in winter wheat. That's typically happening. Well, it can happen at any time. Sometimes real late, actually. But if you completely submerge a seedling and it freezes over and it doesn't melt like almost instantly, yeah, you get 100% mortality, which is another reason why winter wheat scares off some people, because they hear a story like that. But I mean, that's an occurrence that's few and far between, honestly. Do you get snow and all kinds of miserable weather after you plant if you're doing this system? Oh yeah, we've got lots of data on that, but it's never been a detrimental outcome as a result.
Probably the seed can handle the icing better than a seedling, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like if the seed is just sitting there dormant under the ice, it just,
exactly.
as long as it doesn't rot.
Yeah.
Well, and she was using a disc drill. If you're using a shank drill, you might have more of a furrow for it to go in, whereas hers, it might kind of run off of where that plant seed is, right?
Yeah, we actually just published a study on that, comparing the different openers, and I did one back in 2010, and it was kind of interesting because your disc drill provided higher yields for winter wheat, but the Conservapac knife opener system, now owned by John Deere, provided higher yield for spring wheat. But we were seeding our spring wheat conventionally. So then when we did our ultra early and compared a pillar laser to the Conservapac, the pillar laser had a bit of a benefit with ultra early, but nothing really later on. But if you're like dormant seeding, like a frost seed, like of course that disc would probably be better, and that's maybe what we're seeing with that study as well. And a little bit better seed to soil contact over the Conservapac, that's a pretty aggressive opener, right? So
feel free to have a look in the plots and stuff too, and walk in and stuff.
Can you maybe repeat what dates are where so people remember?
Please, Greg.
I gotta know. I got to know.
So between the red flags is January 30th. Between the pink flags is February 28th. On the outsides of both of those is March 13th.
Thank you.
Okay, so March 13th.
Hey! There was a question?
Yeah, so just kind of off what you're saying earlier with the icing over, just in this country with our Chinooks, you've never had a problem where things melt, start to germinate, then it's just cold again, and we have significant die-off, or?
Well, just remember, it has to be, what we're talking about is ice encasement, which means that seedling is completely covered with water and it's frozen again.
do we get that? Yeah, we get that. And we've had some winter wheat that's been completely killed off as a result. But the frequency, to my point, was it's not a regular occurrence with winter wheat, and we haven't ever had it in our ultra early systems, and we've been doing that now for 12 years.
That's good to hear. I was just worried about Chinooks, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, it happens, and there's no way around. Like, you can have the best winter hardiness in the world in your winter wheat variety, and it's not going to survive if it's a prolonged event.
Yeah.
Any other questions out here before we kind of wander back?
Oh my God.
Oh, the seeding dates or rates? Oh, 40 plants for all the ultra early, and then on the outside edges, she said 35 was plants per square foot was the target. With a 10% mortality built into those numbers when we suggest seeding rates.
One question. How many unthreshed heads in the combine after this? Does the thresh eat it?
Or the variety itself, you mean?
Well,
Yeah, that would be more of an environmental thing. I would think it's some varietal thing as well. But as influenced by seeding practice, I don't think it would really be influenced too much unless it was really late, and again, getting hit hard by heat and drought stress might affect that. But that's more of a practical question we haven't really looked at, so maybe you'd have more experience with that.
I've seen where bacterial blight's kind of an issue, and certain varieties like View Field that are more susceptible to that, where it shuts the plant down fast at the end of the season, and then it becomes harder to thresh when you've got bacterial. Yeah, it just kind of melts and glues in there and shrinks to that on or gloom or whatever it's called. And so I've seen varieties where environmental conditions or disease pressure shuts her down too fast, and that causes hard threshing. But I mean, it can be most varieties like we sell, I don't think we really have a hard threshing variety specifically.
Variety times environment.
Variety by environment, yeah.
It can have that tendency, but it needs the right environment to have that happen. And then, so it's a combination of those two, but you have to have those two. And if the variety doesn't have that tendency, it doesn't matter about the environment. So that's what we see in Brian's right.
Of course he is. Just about swore again.
When he gets back to the table, we're gonna rip his shirt off him and we're gonna slide another one on him. Okay? So help me hold him down.
I know.
Yeah.
That you need to record.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna get that on video. Actually, I do talk to the Patera guys quite a bit. They're pretty smart people. So let's wander back along the sprayer track out to the tables there and get some more snacks and coffee. But I think let's give Alison and Brian a hand for hosting and coming out.
I will just.
pretty impressive.
Oh, thank you. I will just add, like, I'll share, yield and stuff and whatever with Greg, but if you have any questions, I don't have all the answers, but I can just share with you what our experience is. So yeah, reach out to me or contact Greg for my contact information, or I post on social media some of these updates and stuff like that, so feel free to look.
So follow North Paddock Farms.
North Paddock Farms.
On your Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Not really Twitter.
No? Okay.
No. That was Michael's department, Mimi.
Okay.
Well, I hope you told the ag minister about it. Put in a good word for me, because apparently we're going to get cut by 1/3. So.
Okay.
We did talk research. We did talk a lot of research. So.
Okay. Well, when it comes to like research and science, like typically Brian's research is very practical. Like when I can see a researcher doing something that we could take to our field and try and mimic, that to me is something that's valuable to farmers. So if you're talking to your MLAs, your MPs, whoever, when it comes to research like this and a lot of what his team does, I really appreciate that. So thank you, Brian, and taking the time to spread the word to people that want to implement what you're doing. So that's got to feel good.
I try, Greg. I try.
Even if you're wearing a darn wrong shirt.
I got some more for sale in the truck.
All right, well, let's wander out and then we'll chat and visit. But that concludes the tour.